record. All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome in to another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and we are proudly presented by SPI Logistics, the best freight agent program in the country. Once again, joined by Grace Sharkey for another edition of Freight Friends. And for those of you who are new here, we typically go through a couple different top stories. Grace joins us once a month in order to cover those top stories. And then we get into some cargo crimes. We get into our favorite hustles or businesses going on in freight right now. And then we also talk a little bit about our favorite logistics of, aka source to porch story. So we'll save that one for the end. But Grace, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm getting excited for F3. We have that next week. So when I say I'm getting excited for it, I'm cramming a bunch of 2 weeks of work into 1 week. So that's fun. No, it's going to be really cool. It's if anyone's been to the event in the past, I think it's going to be twice the event that we've seen before, which is, yeah, exactly. We have the puppies are in town again, so thank goodness for you. We've got puppies back here right now at Chattanooga. I think there's gonna be some really cool events between like 3 and 6, more than we've had in the past. Of course, we've got some really great musical guests lined up too, and just some of the companies I've seen that are coming this year, I think are new. A lot of new companies from the past year, a lot of shippers as well. We'll hear from. So yeah, I'm really getting excited for it, and I'm just happy to see everyone in one place as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, for a little bit of like historical context, the first Freightwaves conference I think that ever happened was 2018, maybe 2019.
Yes.
I know I went to their first one, and then that's when I was blown away. I was like, wow, it feels like it's something for millennials. It feels like something for like the younger generation. I've been to freight conferences before, but this was the first one that I was like, wow, like it really like wowed me, for lack of a better phrase. And then now to see it, being hosted, this is the second year because they took a COVID break during, I think, 2020 and 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2022 was the first one back to big conferences, I think in Arkansas, and then Chattanooga, and then Cleveland, and then now back in Chattanooga. But this time I think it's going to be, like you said, even better, even bigger, because they're shutting down entire blocks. So I saw Craig's tweet the other day that mentioned, he was like, with certain conferences, it's just a convention center and the hotel that people are normally like congregating at. But with this one, they're shutting down the entire blocks of downtown Chattanooga, I believe.
Yeah.
And so basically everyone that you walk around is going to be involved in freight somehow. So the networking capabilities are going to be, just off the charts. I'm curious though, what does the week look like for you? Working for Freightwaves, you got the nice Freightwaves sweater on for folks who can't see. So what does the week look like for you working for Freightwaves? Because it's different than a traditional conference that you go to, where you have a little bit more freedom, I would imagine.
Yeah, there is a level of, so I'll be actually working registration first thing in the morning. So as everyone's checking in, you'll see me there. I then throughout, I believe first day I have one fireside chat at the Freightwaves TV stage. So that's the stage that's out in the hallway for everyone. And then of course, I'm doing the radio show both days, the first 2 days as well. And that'll be at the Freightwaves TV stage too. The fun thing about this event is people will go on stage and they'll present new technologies and things of that nature. So I already have some planned writing time to likely cover a lot of that stuff. There's some clearly our editorial staff, we bring a small group of us and we cover a lot of the chats as well. So there's some work I'll be doing there too. But a lot of this time for me is kind of meeting up with everyone. I like to go through the booth, see what technology people are showcasing, anything new, kind of get a gist of, who's doing what. Like I said, there's a lot of newer companies that are coming to this year. So I'm excited to shake hands. I spend a lot of this time kind of meeting the marketing people as well, and meeting people at the booths and introducing myself. And I will say too, like, uh, I would say last year left with a couple scoops. Wouldn't be surprised if I leave with a couple scoops. You know, you get people, yeah, everyone in one spot, and you'd be surprised how often people come up to me with gossip or things of that nature. So it's it's really it is no, it is kind of fascinating. Like this happened in Cleveland, probably the most it ever happened. You know, whenever this industry gets a little bit tighter and more risk, you could say, involved with it, people come out of the woodworks with different stories and things like that. So yeah, that's it goes by fast. I'll say that. That's the one thing that I love about the conference part is like I have to make sure I have to, like there's a couple of speakers I do want to see, so I need to like be smart about making sure I'm there. But I mean, you get it. It's one of those conferences where you and I barely walk down the hallway without being grabbed for something.
I was about to. My first question was going to be like, how are you going to manage that, knowing that you have to pay attention to these talks, but also you want to be friendly to the people you're talking to, but you're still, you're there to work as well. So how do you? Do you have any tips of like maybe you could give me or maybe like some other folks that you can cut the conversation off and get to work?
Bye. No. I will say one aspect that like really is helpful, and it was not as easy in Cleveland, but easy if it's the same type of it's the same venue, so I got to be able to do it. There's like a back hallway that I could use to get me to the other side of the other hallway. So there's probably gonna be a lot of that happening, which is fun because then I get listen. I like you'll see me do this too. I really like to thank staff at these events. Like I think sometimes people forget like about all the work. So I'll walk this like back hallway and like I see all the chefs and stuff and I'm like, thank you so much. Because like, what are you doing back here? And I'm like escaping, trying to get to the other side of the hallway in 5 minutes. So there is a back hall. I always try to find a back hallway is one.
Smart.
And then the other is like, yeah, just like kind of being. I think people get it. You know, like, hey, I need to get over there right now. Yeah. Or if anything, use it like as an opportunity, like at other conferences, right? If you're about to present, like, hey, I need to go present at this thing, but come with us. Come see what I'm talking about. Like, come enjoy this. So that's it's a lot of that and maneuvering and maybe hiding behind maybe tall Schreiber. He's so tall. I'll just walk behind him. No one will see me. So yeah, that's I will say too. I'll probably wear a heel in the after party, but I am bringing a flat for the conference. So that
You're not bringing any boots. It is Tennessee.
You know, I do have my sparkly Beyonce boots.
Bring them because I have sparkly boots too.
Okay, I will. Right. They're just so heavy. I get so nervous. I'm going to go over. What if I did? I should wear my sparkly boots.
Wear them.
Okay, cool. I'll wear them. They're so ridiculous. They're so ridiculous. Yeah, no, I'll bring them. We'll figure out how to get them in there. Yeah.
So if you're listening, you're hearing us outfit plan live on the show right now and seeing our excitement of just coordinating outfits. I love coordinating outfits.
I know. I got like two, you know me, I got like 2 new shirts and stuff like that. So I'm pumped. Yeah, I've got it all figured out. Now it's not in the suitcase yet. Everything's in a corner of my bedroom, but it's it'll make its way there.
Yeah, I just ordered like 200 new Everything is Logistics pins. So if you listen to the show, come find me, come see me. I'll give you a free pin. Anytime that's kind of like my low key marketing strategy is like anytime someone tells me they love the pod, I immediately pull out a pin and give it to them because I don't know. It's like, just little things to make people happy and remember the show. And y'all know I love pins because I'm a Disney fanatic and all that jazz. What about the event itself? Are you looking forward to anything in particular outside of TI? Because I think both of us are definitely looking forward to that. What about any particular talks or, any parties? What are you looking forward to the most?
I think so. There are definitely a couple things that of course, the TI part's gonna be really fun. I've been listening to like TI Spotify is
Nice.
playlist nonstop for the past week. The first one I'm really pumped for is we got Brad Jacobs as our keynote speaker. So that's listen. First off, he's writing a book that's coming out. And I'm actually getting an advanced copy of it, so we can probably talk about it even like a month before it comes out. I should be getting a
Nice.
copy in December. It's called How to Make a Few $1 billion, which is like cool, so cool. What a cool thing to do.
Casually.
Yeah, awesome. Can't wait to read the book about that. So and I've seen some of his talks since then, kind of discussing the book. So if it's anything like that, I think people will leave with a really interesting leadership tips,
Hmm.
and just on how he builds a team, how he evaluates companies, how he runs meetings. There was a
Interesting.
really good talk about. I'll send it to you too, so you can see it. But about just how he like how they pre-plan meetings, how they prepare, all this really cool stuff.
Oh,
So
I would love to see that because I think meetings
yeah,
are just such a giant time suck and waste of time, and it bugs me to no end when people are just like, "No, we just need to have a meeting and hash this out." And I'm like, "No, you need to hash it out in your head first. Come to
yes.
the meeting with specific goals so you're not wasting everybody else's time with your brainstorming on a call." I cannot stand it. I think we waste so much time during the day on pointless meetings. So that's my little mini rant. Sorry, carry on.
No, and I'll send you the video where he talks about it because if that's your critique, like you're gonna just absolutely love how he runs meetings because it's very almost more work in advance to the meeting,
Mm,
so that once you're at the meeting, like we're discussing how to get stuff done. So yeah, I think that'll be great. I'm really excited to actually like set a personal meeting to like meet him. I think he's like one of the coolest people in this industry, and I mean, he's like what I can't remember the folklore guy's name, but what everything he touches just turns to gold. So,
oh,
um,
King Midas.
King Midas,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly right. So, yeah, I'm pumped to meet him and to listen to him speak. So that's like I said, if I am running past you, it's likely because I'm gonna go watch Brad Jacobs talk. So, that's gonna be a fun one. I will say another one I'm pumped for that I just recently heard about. So when we were at CSCMP, I was talking to uh, oh god, what's his first name now? It's gonna drive me nuts. Spencer Frazier from
Mm,
JB Hunt, and he is doing a chat with BNSF, and it sounds like they're going to be really discussing intermodal and really what JB Hunt and BNSF's long term goals are and how they see the industry changing. And it, you know, I'm trying to like broaden my education a little bit more in
mm,
spaces I don't know, and intermodal is one of them. And over the last year, I mean, they've had their own issues, right, with labor. I think what's fascinating about uh, intermodal in particular is that all of them are publicly traded companies.
mm,
They all have insane operating ratios. So, like
mm,
we talk about what the average trucking company's operating ratio is like in 90 percentile or 90% ish area, right? So, right, for everyone out there who might not get that stuff, like for every dollar they make, they spend 90 cents, so it's
mm,
like your very
mm,
small margins where
mm,
intermodal is like they're in like the 60s,
hmm.
and you see all these issues. So like remember, like they had all these issues with paying drivers more and giving them vacation time. So you sit here and it's like now you have to operate in a public space where you're working to, of course, have a better outcome for your shareholders.
Mhm.
But now you also have to invest in safety, pressures on them with all the derailments that we've seen. Well, derailments happen, but of course, with Ohio derailment and some of the more like toxic ones,
Mhm.
we've had, I think it was CSX just recently had an issue with trainees getting killed just from the safety of railroads. And I think people just don't really truly understand it as a mode in this industry, let
Mm.
alone the safety behind it. One of my good friends, I'm not going to say who the person is. I hope they're listening though, because they know They are. Her husband actually works in the railroads, and it's just fascinating hearing the stories. And we're over here just like focused on drivers and stuff like that. And it's like, so when I say we, really myself. And so I'm excited to kind of hear them out and hear more about that space from two really great companies in the space as well, and two companies that have incredible assets in the space. So talk about, containers and things of that nature. JB Hunt is one to listen to, and Spencer just seemed very, very enthusiastic about the chat. So that one I'm excited to see and maybe learn more about too. The last one I'll say, and sorry to use this as a time to, of course, talk about Freightwaves too, but we have some sonar updates coming out, and some that I think people are really, 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 really going to like. And so they're going to be announcing that stuff during F3. I'm not going to give too much detail more on it, but I can say if you've used sonar in any way, shape, or form, the announcements that we're going to make are, I think, 100% of our customers are going to be very, very happy about. And those who haven't maybe bought sonar yet or even looked at sonar are going to be really interested in too. So yeah, those are, I think, the biggest areas. That I'm also dyeing my hair blue, so like that's going to be super fun. And the dye all came in.
A Freightwaves favorite.
Yeah, we're going to do a little this. Listen, this is gonna look so nice. I've done this before, so I'm not nervous about it at all. A little like aquamarine, more on
that
the
looks
bottom.
A little teal. It looks a little Jaguars teal.
Yes, it is very jag teal. And that's gonna be kind of near the bottom. So when I like curl it, it's dimensional. And then this will be like more of the top. I'll probably separate a little bit of the bang too, like do like 2 strands of this.
So you dye your own hair?
Oh yes.
Okay.
I dye my own hair. Yes. And I have done it before too. Honestly, I need to cut it too. So I'm probably gonna trim up some bangs a little bit. How this works in my house is I always underestimate the time it takes me to do this. So Friday after I get off the radio show, I'll probably eat dinner, be lazy for like 2 hours. Then around 10 o'clock at night, I'll start doing this. And I always start with gloves, and then I immediately take them off and just start getting in there with my hands and my little brush. And then I'll sit around, and it'll be like 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I'll wash it, and then I'll go to sleep. And then
you have to leave it on for that long?
Well, it'll probably take me about an hour and a half, an hour-ish to like get it in there and like get every piece of hair done. Like that's the biggest thing, is you don't want to like miss anything. And then I usually keep it in. I like to keep it in, honestly, for like close to 2 hours, just to make sure it's like there, and stuck in there. And then I'll wash it out. And my favorite part is I'll wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh God, like, you ever like get an extreme haircut or like something like that, and you just forgot you did it, or like you get your face painted and then you look in the mirror and you're like, that's every morning I do this. I'll wake up and be like, oh geez, that's right, like your hair's blue now. So I love it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of make the distinction of like the prep work that is involved with like men who go to conferences and women who go to conferences.
Yeah, like, for real. Yeah,
it's totally different. Your nails, your outfits, your hairs. You got to plan your hair wash days because you got to plan to be out all day, and your hair still got to look good from morning to night, and that's very time consuming, very challenging, and very expensive.
Yeah, thank you for saying. It's like I have mine. You just reminded me I need to get some dry shampoo.
Yep.
But yeah, the hair washing schedule is like a whole thing, and I think that's what takes me so long to do it. It's like people don't realize I have very thick, long hair, so like it takes a lot of time for me to color this, and it'll stay probably for a good month and a half.
Too, your hair.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. Yes. It's very long. So, like, I'll use most of this dye. Yeah.
How long do you keep the dye in?
It'll start to slowly like fade out. So, like, probably around Thanksgiving, it'll be more of like a kind of a cool teal than like anything else. But
perfect for jag season.
Yes. Well, yeah, you know what? And on that note, too, I'm screwed. So, I've lost my boy to an Achilles surgery for the rest of the season. So my fantasy team is just, can I swear on this show?
Yeah.
They're fucked, the Vikings are screwed. Oh man, it's not good. It's
Justin
not good.
Jefferson went down earlier this season. He was my number one pick in my I am either in next to last or last place in both my leagues. I'm like, how is this possible to have 3 or 4 people on IR already? And I'm just screwed. It's a sad story to tell, and unfortunately. You did mention the parties. TI is the big one for me. There's a couple of other musical performances too that I'm not exactly sure of who they are, but
I've heard from drivers. Kenny Wade Shepherd is like a pretty good artist as well. I haven't really listened to anything, but I've heard that he's great. I mean, a DJ. If the DJ can't screw it up, I hope
yeah.
like we'll see what happens. But it's that venue's so cool,
Yes.
and if there's anything I told myself I'm gonna, I remember last year like not eating food, so I'm just gonna like make sure that happens more.
It's almost like a wedding where you have to force yourself, okay, we're gonna eat
Yeah,
because we've been running around all day. Like that's not good for us. We
yeah,
need health. And don't end up like me where you leave a conference and you're sick and you just keep going.
yes.
I got the most sick I've ever been after going to CSCMP and then immediately going on a bachelorette party and after an Epcot trip with you. So
Yeah.
if you heard the last recording, if my voice sounded strange, it was me powering through, not being able to blow my nose for 2 hours and just disgusting sickness for a week. Nobody wants to hear about that though. What I do, so a couple of other things, the block party vibe, I wanted to cover that. Adam Wingfield, I think this is his first time speaking at a Freightwaves conference, long overdue.
Yes.
Glad it's finally happening because he's literally one of the smartest people in all of freight, and he's helping small carriers to dominate in 2024. We'll get into a little bit of, like freight fraud and cargo crimes a little bit later on. But a couple of those talks are centered around that, which is crazy. We're at a 10-year high for cargo theft right now.
Yeah.
And then TriumphPay, they got a little barbecue going on in Tennessee. So I'm excited to get some good barbecue. Chris Voss. And then also, I don't want to butcher his name, but the scientist who's always on like National Geographic and Discovery Channel and all that. I'm not going to try it.
Is it Michi Kukaku?
Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, it's Japanese. You know me, girl.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
Yeah. I might have said his first name might have another syllable in there, but I think Kaku is his last name.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kaku is his last name. Michio, maybe his first
Michio.
name. Michio.
Yeah, it's is it Michio?
Yes.
Yep.
Michio. Okay.
Oh, yes.
New York Times best-selling author, The God Equation, The Quest for the Theory of Everything. He's a theoretical physicist, professor, and futurist. So that's going to be a really exciting conversation. Then Chris Voss is like the famous FBI negotiator, teaching you like sales tips. So those are a few of like the must-attend ones that I definitely want to hit up. I think that about covers it as far as like the preview. I was going to have this show be centered around sort of freight tech and what we think like, the 2023 told us kind of hints into 2024. But with everything you just said about, the stories that are going to be coming out, I think that'll make for a great episode for next time to be able to talk about all of the cool companies, we saw at F3. And the cool thing about F3 is because I'm typically a little late to conferences. Like I don't like getting there at like 7 a.m, like some freaks. I get there, like 9:30, 10. But the best thing about Freightwaves conferences is that you can just pull up the live streaming app and I can watch everything while I'm getting ready and then feel like I haven't missed anything. So unlike other conferences where you can't really do that, this one you can, which is awesome.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
All right. Next topic, logistics girly.
Yeah, I forgot that was on the
So I want to hear all about this. This is a new initiative to sort of set the stage for you. New initiative for you. It's a Substack. It's a LinkedIn page, also a Twitter account. So tell us a little bit about sort of the goal around Logistics Girly, the concept of it. What do you want people to know about it?
Yeah, so I guess like right now it's gonna evolve into something, and for me, it's just kind of like an outlet for me to kind of share the cool, more female-driven stories I think in this industry, and just highlight a lot of what women are doing in this industry. I guess the way I'm treating it right now is maybe kind of like and I'm really working on more blogs coming out and working with actually others in the industry. I'm really passionate about getting, especially those in the LGBTQIA plus groups, like writing their experiences. Like I don't want this to just be involved around me, but you know, something that we were talking about, and listen, I love. How do I say this appropriate? I love the movement that we're seeing in Freight right now, of kind of coming together as a community, laughing at ourselves, and coming up with solutions to really hard problems. And whatever, I never. I always speak the truth anyway. So my truth is that sometimes though with that is it's also grown a tad bit more freight broy at the same time. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we all laugh at the freight bro, and it's we all know we've worked in offices, etc. But with that energy, it's like it's almost ignoring more of the female experience in this industry. Like I'll give you a quick example. The like tobacco jokes, right? Like that stuff is funny. It is funny that a lot of people in our space like to,
Oh, the dip, right?
yeah, dip, right? Like,
Okay.
and Zin is a little bit different than dip, but still, but also it's the grossest thing in the world. Like, I can't tell you how frustrated I
Disgusting.
would be in an office, especially, like where you just have men spitting in bottles all day,
It's
and
just a
it's
lot of
just
masculine energy,
a lot of testosterone, a lot of
which is
like
not
women.
bad.
No, it's not bad, but also women don't like that, and it's and I'm just like it's gross,
It is
like, and
stupid gross.
it's stupid gross, and honestly, wouldn't be surprised if we did a study in a female driven logistics company compared to a man, how that's probably not even allowed on the floor. And it's just, for me, it's just like, you should have to go outside with cigarette smoke. And listen, I smoked cigarettes for a long time. I gave them up about 4 years ago, and it was the hardest thing
Good for
ever. I
you.
understand the tobacco addiction, but like when you start making fun of it, what you're saying is like everyone has to agree that this is funny, and everyone has to feel like this is appropriate to be in an office. And I know that's not true. And I think it's tough for women to see sometimes offices make rules like that, but also like, okay, if the men get to, and I understand some women chew too, but if they get to do that in office, then can we get tampons? Like it for me, it's like that equality aspect, right? Like of are
So
we
like freight,
bending?
not to it is stop you
Yes.
there, but freight brokerages tend to like hand these things out, like hand out the tins to the guys on the
I
floor.
well, they'll just let the bottle sit there all day
Oh yeah, the
long, and
spitters.
let them do it all day long, which is gross. I mean, if you're spending, not 100% of it's going in the bottle at the end of the day. It's just like it's not something that I would say a lot of women want to be around. And you know what? There's probably a lot of guys that don't like it either, to be honest with you, too. So, anyways, back to logistics girly. So I'm seeing this start to come even more into fruition, and I this kind of like
Office
testosterone
culture
driven culture. Yeah.
that's very
And
testosterone heavy.
yes, and I just wanted to create a space that women can go and make those jokes too, or make a joke that's like that's disgusting, like, and not have a bunch of people jumping on them, saying that, oh, here we go, the women's rights type of stuff. So, and not to say that that's happened in all the experiences with certain groups, but it has happened to me on Twitter before. I mean, there's times where even some posting some of the individuals or thought topics on the radio, people will push back again. So I wanted to create a safe space where it's like almost like a BuzzFeed or something like that, where women can go and see, or on like LinkedIn or on Twitter, more female focused content.
Hmm.
And and what's interesting, and I just want to help it improve in the algorithms. I want people to see it more when they're going through their timelines. And that's, I understand, in order for that to happen, like there needs to be the engagement behind it. So I just want to create kind of this space that like push that same energy out there. And you know what's interesting, Blythe, is like I've noticed doing it that, like I wanted to kind of make it funny at first, and I started like looking, and I think there's some blog post and kind of opinion articles that I could write that could make it kind of clever and funny, but it's really hard to find female focused content that's not cynical,
Mm,
like, which I'm like kind of interested in and find fascinating. Like a lot of the stuff that I'm able to share or retweet, etc., I'm noticing is like very uplifting. And that's like, I think it goes back to kind of that like the energy that I want to put out there. It's like, no, like what are we doing to move this industry forward? And how are women a part of that conversation? And what are we doing out there that's really getting stuff done? And I'm just finding incredible people across the globe who've been contributing to logistics that um, would have never made your timeline through the some of the broy stuff. So
yeah.
I just, that's kind of like where it started, is like let's make some space for women. And
Yeah, shine a light on other stories too, because it,
yes,
it does it, especially just in my experience working at, two different freight brokerages. It's very the men outnumber the women like 9 to 1. So it's very, and I don't know if there's ever been any kind of study on this, but I I think I've maybe known 3 or 4 female freight brokers in 2 different companies. And these were, we had over 100 employees at each company. Most of the women that worked there were working in accounting.
yeah,
I was the executive assistant and also the marketing person, but typically you'll find a
yeah,
lot of women in marketing as well. And
hmm,
I wonder why that is. I wonder why that happens. So I would love if like any, associations are out there, any, companies that are doing this kind of research. I would love to know what the ratio of women working in this industry, who's working in sales, who's working at, we met Carly Gunby, who works at Transfix, and she's a sales leader at
yes,
her
yeah,
company. So I wonder how many other like Carly Gunbys are out there that, their stories could be told as well.
yeah.
So it's not to like bash the freight bro mentality, because I think it's a lot of fun, but it's also like the more stories I see around that is like, well, what other stories aren't being told? And I think that's a good place to find yourself in, especially with Logistics Girlie, is being able to tell some of those other stories that aren't being told, because we've said it a million times on this show. There are so many stories that could be told within your own company, that look for those opportunities to tell those stories. And I think that when you think of it from that lens of like Logistics Girlie, you could think of it from the lens of what kind of women centric focused stories within my own company maybe could be told through this platform.
Yeah, and I do want to touch on something too, because I don't want it. It came from a spot of bringing more female focused stories
Yeah.
to the limelight. But the reason I call it like Logistics Girly is because I think even on like in social media we use like the term girly, like I'm a Taylor Swift girly. Like boys will say that too. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the you're like a stan or like a fan of a certain thing, and a part of this is like I want men to feel like they're a part of it too, and that they are passionate about other types of stories in this space as well. But I also, and something I just really want to make sure I can focus on, is I know that there is a lot. I know there's a lot of gay, lesbian, again, LGBTQIA plus people in this industry who may not feel like they have a space to open up about what their lives are like in this
Mm,
industry as a whole. And that's something that, as even just writing in a space, has been really hard for me to find.
mm,
And I think it's hard to find those individuals because they don't have a space to go
mm.
to feel safe as well and tell their stories. And I I just, if myself as just a straight white woman doesn't always feel comfortable in some spaces in this industry. I cannot even imagine
Oh,
some of
true.
the situations that those groups have felt and what they felt in meetings, or even being a part of just like health insurance talks, or family talks, right? If adopting children, or looking at growing your family and having to, you know, or even just transitioning like in this
Mhm.
industry, and how do you find the perfect hire who's willing to have a bathroom available for you, you know,
Mhm.
like, and that's, I'm passionate about that kind of stuff outside of just logistics. It's something that, I mean, honestly, like what I went to school is just kind of help these groups in particular.
Mm.
And so I want to be able, if I always said, if I ever had like a platform, that I would do my best to open it up to other people. And that's kind of like where a lot of this energy is too, is like not just getting more women out there, but like how many, lesbian leaders are there out there in this space, and what are they doing,
Mhm.
and investors, even like opening that stuff up, so that maybe what if there's like a really great freight tech guru out there who just doesn't feel like she has or he has anywhere to go,
Mhm.
they have anywhere to go to get financing for this great idea they have, and our industry is hurting because of that.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of places I kind of want to take it, but that's where it's at right now. And it'd be cool at some point to like make merch on it, and like have people like kind of in this logistics girly space. My goal at Manifest actually is to like make pins as well and hand
Nice.
those out. So yeah, I'm excited about it, and I'm just we'll see where it goes for now. But I will say, the even the LinkedIn page, I was going through analytics, like I'm starting to get engagement, like 20% engagement over there already with some of just the posting that we had. I'm trying to do like a slay of the day, like every day of just someone in the space doing something really cool. So I'm getting there. I do a lot of stuff outside of it, and I want to make sure Freightwaves and my work comes first. But this is kind
Sure.
of like my side hobby until we'll see where it goes.
And I think that that's so important for a lot of creators who, if you're lucky enough to be in a position where you have a full-time gig, to have that other outlet that you can do whatever the hell you want to do with.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter whatever media company I've ever worked for. I have always made sure to have that other outlet just so I can post whatever the hell I want, where I'm EIC, I'm editor in chief over there. And these are the editorial decisions that we're going to make for my platform, versus when you're getting a check from someone else, where obviously you have to, cater to what those needs are. So kudos
yeah.
to you for the launch and
Thanks.
the initiative, getting it going. It's not easy to balance something like that in addition to a full-time job. But I imagine you'll probably see, so you've already seen a little bit of success already, and so that just going to continue to snowball and continue to build. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you see anything we're sharing on LinkedIn or Twitter, just share it. Like I said, for me, it's about getting that content in timelines that haven't seen it before, and I think that's really the first step, is just getting this whole other piece of our industry out there.
Yeah, I'm making a note to myself right now to include those social links to Logistics Girly in the show notes, just to make sure and make it easy for you folks to follow along with those initiatives. So I guess it's time to move on to the next topic, and that is favorite ideas or hustles in freight. So I have one that just happened from a conversation from yesterday. But do you want to go first? Do you want me to take it first?
Let's see. I just talked for a while. You take it. Let's go
All
there.
right, all right, all right. I want to talk about yard management solutions, which sounds like, maybe like initially like snooze fest. But so while, as we're on, the conference talk, I was at CSCMP. You walking around the expo floor and you kind of deciding what booths to go up and talk to and which ones you kind of will, and just keep on walking, don't make eye contact. So then, there was one that really caught my eye because they had these big LCD screens that were surrounding their booth. So they had one of the bigger booths, And this is Yard Management Solutions, not just YMS technology, but their actual name, which I think is brilliant from like an SEO perspective. Their
Yeah.
name is actually like Yard Management Solutions. So I talked with Colin and Seve from the Yard Management Solutions team yesterday. That pod is coming out soon. But they're also, Colin, I was already following him on Twitter already before even connecting the dots. So it was a great interview. He was wearing his Please Advise hat, so he's part of that crew, as well. And they really broke down like sort of the importance of a yard management solution. So at CSCMP, they have these big screens, and you can, the way it kind of looks is like an eagle eye view of your entire yard. So where the trucks are parked, where you want them to move, you can literally take it, hold your finger on a container and drag and drop it to another dock just simply by a touch of a button. When you do that, it notifies the driver, it notifies the dock worker, it notifies everyone that's involved with that shipment that dock placement or that truck placement has been moved, which streamlines a lot of it. Because what Colin was explaining is that for the overwhelming majority of warehouses in this country, essentially how they're tracking inventory, how they're tracking their trucks is they walk out into the yard first thing in the morning and they just write down the different trucks that are in the yard. You can imagine that's very time consuming. Obviously that information is updated throughout the day. So there's a lot of inefficiencies when you have to stop what you're doing, go outside and count how many trucks are in the yard and count what inventory is on that truck, and, just keeping tabs so you can unload those trucks in an efficient way. I was a little confused at first because I just assumed that a YMS technology would already be incorporated into any sort of WMS, a warehouse management software platform. But it's not the case or it's the case that with a lot of software in freight that the software does one thing really well, and then they try to add in components, and the add-in components just aren't as good as something that is dedicated to it. So talking with that team over there at, the YMS technology, they were talking about things that increase efficiency, such as having like, say you have all of these trucks that are, ready to get unloaded in the morning. Well, which one are you going to prioritize first? Which one makes the most sense first? So they were giving examples of like reefer load. If a reefer, the temperature inside of the truck, if the temperature is, getting a little bit too hot, or the freight inside of the truck is in danger to spoil, then what you can do is that it would upload and it would update all of your systems to let you know that, hey, this freight is about to reach spoilage level temperatures. You need to unload it quick, and you need to get it into a space that's dedicated for that reefer shipment. So instead of that freight getting spoiled because you're inefficiently tracking those kinds of things throughout the day, that software can alert you to that specific problem. Or another problem was like at one of the warehouses where they get a lot of manufacturing facilities where they get a lot of tire shipments, or different sources of materials that they need to make their goods. Well, if you're unloading one dock with a bunch of tires on it and you have 4 other shipments that are scattered all throughout the yard, you might want to prioritize all of those truck tire shipments to come in through that same dock, so all of the workers can get all of that freight off that's all the same and get it to the same area, instead of splitting those teams up and creating those additional inefficiencies. There was another example that they had too, was at a steel manufacturer, and they had 2 different shipments. One was for actual steel that is ready to be used, and then the other was sort of scrap steel. And with the scrap steel shipment, they loaded it in the wrong truck, but they were able to find out about it ahead of time before that the good steel that's ready to be used went to the wrong place, that, a high valuable steel versus scrap steel. They would have lost a lot of money on that shipment. So using the YMS software, or using just YMS software in general, can help you increase those efficiencies. And, they can integrate into any kind of WMS or TMS. But I thought that was really, really fascinating. Is like, that's one area that you can increase productivity, you can increase your efficiency, save money, prevent fraud, all of these things that we talk about, on a regular basis. I didn't know how important a YMS solution is, but now I do. So stay tuned for that episode. It was really, really great conversation. And just hearing the different perspectives on how the growth of this particular part of software in freight has grown.
Yeah, I think we're going to see even more investment in that piece too,
Mhm.
because a couple of years ago, visibility was a big thing. Like, where's my shipment? Where is it now? But it's very difficult to you lose that visibility within the yard, right? Like, I know,
Mhm.
okay, they checked in, but like, what does that mean, right? Like, how soon are they going to be unloaded? There's a company that recently just got a really nice chunk of investment. Terminal Industries, I want to say it's called.
Hmm.
Yes, Terminal Industries, and that they're using computer vision for kind of the same thing. Like, basically, their cameras will, as a truck pulls in, they don't really even need to check in. They're able to pull the VIN number and the license plate number from the truck, know what it's there for, what it has on it. As that carrier, goes to its dock, they have visuals on that, and which is helpful because it's like when we talk about detention being a big issue. I mean, we're
I'm
talking about
glad you brought
getting,
that up.
yeah, like, let's get to a point where um, you're not sitting here. You're like, yeah, uh, you probably understand this, like, especially on the carrier side. Like, so many times you deliver somewhere, and let's say the driver's 15 minutes late, and they're like, well, you're gonna have to sit here for 6 hours then. Like, there's no way you're telling me in the next 6 hours that there's no open spots. Some places there might be, but I guarantee that there's someone else who probably will be late or something where you can slide them into that. And that's like where the importance of that type of software goes. Because if I can tag that up with visibility software and say, okay, you're 15 minutes late, let me look at the rest of my analytics, showcase that, okay, truck number 10 who's supposed to be delivering to us in an hour is behind. Well, then I know I can probably slip you into that appointment and then work on putting him somewhere else or her somewhere else as well. So I think that's when we talk about a lot of the issues for drivers in particular, where it's going to get really interesting. Plus, you're able to, with the right yard management system, invest more into like drop shipments, right?
Mm.
Where you have the trailers just sitting there and you load them up and the carriers come in and out. And that's the best way to get rid of detention, is the driver just comes in, locks up the trailer and keeps it moving, and does kind of the power only situation, or drops another trailer and takes this one instead. So yeah, I think happy that you're finding that space interesting, because I think that's where we'll see a lot more investment over the next couple years as well.
Yeah, I'm super glad you brought up the fact of like driver detention or just wasting drivers' time,
Yeah.
and because anytime they're sitting, they're not getting paid, and so one of the bigger issue or one of the bigger complaints that I see on Twitter, I see on Discord is all drivers talking about getting their time back and making their time much more efficient, so they are making more money, so they can stay out on the road, and so you don't lose a lot of those really good veteran drivers, and so you just don't keep filling up the pipeline with inexperienced, drivers and trainers, and trying to the inexperienced trainers trying to teach the new drivers, and they just wash out very quickly because of the way that they're treated. And then you have the veteran drivers who are having their time wasted as well. And so if you can have different solutions, like don't just like you said, don't just check in the freight and think it's done. If you can optimize and you can make your processes more efficient within the yard and how you manage that freight, it can make the rest of the process run much more efficiently, much more smoothly. And then you have a situation where drivers want to come to your facility, they want to deliver to your facility, and you're not one of these shippers or manufacturers getting shamed on social media.
Yeah, and it's like I'm tired of this like whole situation of like, oh yeah, just write your like in and out times on your paper. Like, we have to have receipts, like, and this is what's gonna get us to a point where we have the receipts. There's no like, oh well, as a broker, right? Like, tricking you didn't write it on your POD, so you didn't write it. You didn't have detention. It's like, shut up. They're like,
Yeah,
we have,
take care of the damn drivers.
yeah, and this is going to be an easy way to look into it and showcase, hey, you were late, hey, you weren't late. It's a third party type of answer, so yeah, I love it, and I think
and
there's a
and
lot
you
of
say
problems it can solve.
from a like just a business perspective, you save a ton of money when you're not paying detention. So I
Yes.
think Michelin, which is one of the YMS clients that they were talking about in the interview, they saved. I don't want to say millions, but I know it was at least hundreds of thousands of dollars at different facilities just because they're using this technology. And so
Yeah.
it pays for itself in less than a year if you can decrease detention, if you can decrease these kinds of payments, you make drivers happier, you make your team more efficient. So in tough times, tough economic times, like you need to be more efficient, you need to be more productive, and this sounds like a really good way to make that happen. Okay, so what's your favorite idea or hustle going on in freight?
So this goes into areas that I'm trying to learn more about as well, and we're going to go a little bit more globally. And there's basically the hustle is creating better systems for regulatory bodies. So the company in particular I've covered numerous times is a company called Cargo X,
Hmm.
and what they do is they help with document scanning, creating electronic BOLs for companies, but they've been actually focused more on these big governmental groups. So I first learned about them when they started working with Egypt a
Ooh.
couple of years ago. Yeah. So, and this is where I think this kind of stuff gets fascinating. So Egypt has this, what they call their, I think, 2025 vision. And their goal is to basically prepare their customs for a more e-commerce, more trade type of environment. And in order to do that, they are going to have to invest in technology to make themselves faster. So basically, I think, I'm looking up the year right now. I want to say it was in 2021 when they first started. But basically, CargoX came in and started working with Egypt to create this system called uh, or NAVSA, so the National Single Window for Foreign Trade Facilitation. Now, it's working with Egypt's system called MTS, and it's owned 80% by Egypt, but they're using the blockchain technology of CargoX and their documentation capabilities to basically make customs faster.
Hmm.
So this went into effect in October of last year. And sorry, Egypt's 2030 vision. That's what it's for. And basically, they went from they integrated over 26 cargo clearance related government systems. So before, when you're going through Egypt, you had to go through 26 different cargo clearance systems. They reduced the number of documents needed from 18 to 6. And so all of those 26 systems are now under that one national single window, and you only need 6 different documents in order to actually facilitate trade through in and out of the country, which I think is really cool. Like, you just think about it, like these are not just problems that small businesses are having, but these are
Hmm.
big governmental problems too. And fun facts, like learning about this stuff. Egypt is the only country in the Middle East and North Africa to avoid any type of economic recession. So that's their like goal, is they want to focus on that, continue to be a good trades partner basically. And it looks like since they've started using it, it's been used by over 32,000 importers, 20,000 exporters, 2,200 brokers, 300 shipping agencies, over 74,000 foreign exporters, handling about 12,000 trade transactions a day,
Cool.
which just sounds like some really incredible data at the end of the day, if you think about it, right? Like, this thing is learning even more and more every single day. Now, the reason this came back into my mind a couple weeks ago is that they actually just announced to CargoX as well that they're now working with Uganda's government to do the same exact thing.
Oh, that's so
Um,
cool.
yeah, and like that's what I think is like really interesting, is like, you know, a lot of countries around the world have nowhere near as even the small technologies that we have here today in the
Hmm.
US. And so I think it's just interesting to see like who's out there facilitating these transactions, who's out there building these partnerships. And oh, I got an update when asking them about the Uganda situation. on the Egypt one, after the past year of all this happening, they've been able to, in Egypt, bring import compliance costs from $600 down to $165, and release times on cargo from 29 days to under 9. So, and that's just going to improve, right, as the system gets smarter and smarter. And I just think that that kind of stuff is really cool to like see who's behind some of like our big regulatory bodies or governments that's actually getting this stuff done, because we can invent, especially on a global scale, like all of like the blockchain or documentation type of technologies that we want. But if the government's actually not using them, it becomes even harder to integrate at a larger scale. So that's like what I think is just interesting, is like, okay, who's focused on this? And there's a lot of these type of initiatives. I know Singapore is like a big one that they're focused on. So yeah, I like learning about these kind of these areas a little bit more. I've talked to you about this too. Like sometimes the global aspect of supply chain can get just like so complicated that it's like overwhelming. So for me, it's like these small use cases like kind of help me understand the bigger picture of it all too, and to actually see some really, I mean, we're talking about especially something like Egypt or Uganda, like we can easily go and buy anything off of Timu today and just know that we'll get it delivered in a certain amount of days. Like we're talking about different economic groups who, if this doesn't happen, won't be able to ever ship something to themselves in 2 days, let alone a week, So it's the fairness and the equality aspect of it too that I kind of find fascinating.
And I just, for folks who may not be aware, like the bill of lading and the fact that we haven't evolved into an electronic bill, or it's taken this long to evolve into, electronic bill of lading, is so fascinating to me, because there's clear evidences, it just from a historical concept, I just Googled this, but there are clear evidences of the use of a document similar to a bill of lading in Roman times. For the
Yeah.
purposes of this discussion, it may be said that the modern bill of lading was born in the 11th century, which marked the rise of the great commercial cities of the Mediterranean. This comes from the Yale School of Law when it's talking about a bill of lading. And so what Cargo X, a beautiful website, by the way. I
Yeah.
love a good freight website, and that one is really one of the best I've ever seen. But the electronic bill of lading concept is just, it's so intricate, because I just did an interview earlier this week for Spire Global. I do an interview, I do a podcast for them called Maritime Means, and one of our recent interviews that we did is from Pauline with DocFlow, and DocFlow helps maritime freight forwarders. And they help them, with freight forwarders, it's very different than like a freight broker relationship. Some of the same capabilities between those two roles, but a freight forwarder, you will likely have that relationship with someone for 10 years.
Yeah.
So she specializes in building a logistics enablement solution. I think it's the first logistics enablement solution. And one of the things that she said was that just the clearing customs, you making sure that the bill of lading is properly filled out and signed, that is so much of our industry, especially in other countries, is just done through paper and fax machines. And that's going to be a reality for a long time. And so for a lot of forwarders, they spend so much time just using whiteout on PDFs that have been scanned, a million times, and trying to fill it out, where you have the small box of information of where you can put some of these, where the cargo is, and, different, cargo information. And so she was saying that for a lot of these companies, especially all over the world, it's very challenging for them, for the language barrier to, from all of the customs rules for each of, these different countries, and just making sure that you're following all the rules so your shipments don't get held up. And so it sounds like Cargo X is also helping with the electronic bill of lading, which would, I think, complement, DocFlow immensely for what, she was talking about with a lot of the persistent issues that go on within this industry, mostly because it looks like Cargo X is powered by blockchain, which, there's a record of transaction that's electronically seen. All parties can see it. It's less likely, to fall victim to fraud. As I just mentioned, like the whiteout part of bill of ladings and things like that. So that's super fascinating and beautiful website too, by the way. So cool.
I'll let
That's
them know
really
you
cool.
said that. Yeah. Yeah, they're really, really interesting. And I think again, it's like these fascinating use cases out there. And especially blockchain, the biggest critique is like it will take this mass adoption in order for
Hmm.
it to really work. So if we can get governments on board, I think that'll help with that too.
Yeah, for sure. Great find. Okay, so I think that, that kind of segues nicely into the next story that I wanted to talk about. And this article was tweeted out by one of our favorite founders in freight, and that's Ryan Peterson of Flexport. I know there's a lot of drama. We talk about there's a lot of drama around
Yeah, even more
Flexport.
now today, huh? Yeah, geez.
Since the convoy news, quickly, do you want to recap that for everybody of what the high level view of what's going on with convoy and Flexport?
Yeah, we'll stick high level because it's oh geez. So
I put you on
basically
the spot
it's
there. I'm sorry.
no, it's not. It's just so and I will say okay, so long story short, Flexport it was rumored for a while that they were for I guess a week they were interested in buying Convoy. For those that might know, they are and Junior brought this up actually on what the truck too. He has actually a lot of spent a lot of time in more of the customs freight forwarding role, and he said even some of the toughest part of freight forwarding is once you get it here is getting it on a domestic truck
Hmm.
and following through with that side of the transaction, and because it's quite different than everything that you do, just like you were saying on the freight forwarding side. So there's an opportunity, right, for Peterson and Flexport to purchase Convoy's technology and apply that to their brokerage unit, their domestic unit that I believe Bill Dragart from Uber Freight, right, is leading. And is still leading today. He's wasn't one of those cut from from a lot of Peterson's cutting, but so then it came out yesterday that there was an internal email sent out saying that that transaction is going through. Now we don't know what the purchase number, what the actual cost is. I'm sure we'll probably figure that out. I will say I'm hoping to figure that out. I'll tell you this. I'll put my whole life on it that it's not $3.6 billion. But they are looking to integrate that into their system. And it sounds like bringing in multiple people from Convoy as well, including Dan Lewis, and as part of probably a leadership role in that spot. The one thing I will say about this, real quick too, is that they are purchasing just its technology.
Hmm.
They are not purchasing the company Convoy. So in this situation, it's not going to be like a situation where you see Convoy powered by Flexport or something like
Hmm.
that. It like for instance, Transplace, I believe technically goes by Transplace still, but they're owned by Uber Freight, right?
Okay. Huh.
Um, and so it's not going to be that. It's just they're purchasing the tech, the behind the scenes stuff. They're not taking the name. They also are not taking its liabilities,
Hmm.
and which is interesting to me because um, just as this market is tough and we're talking about capacity leaving the market, and this is again just something I'm interested in and I have not got answers on yet, but looking into like, does that mean is there carriers out there that are still not being paid? Like, and that's I think my concern is like, okay, are we going to see then a bankruptcy filing from Convoy, where likely carriers will get paid? Like, what's happening with Convoy as an entity next? Because again, they're just purchasing their tech, which means that asset is now gone, right? And they are only, and from the numbers I've heard, nowhere again near billions.
Hmm.
So I have heard from drivers that in the last couple of days of Convoy, they did get quick paid. So I'm hoping that everyone got
That's
taken
good.
care of. And that's something I'd like to really try to investigate into, talking to even Rachel about a little bit. But that's one thing to know. We won't see like a Convoy within Flexport. It will just be Flexport purchasing and applying that technology to their tech suite.
Yeah, that's super interesting because convoy just I'm going to isolate this point separate from everything else. Convoy just has such a cool name. They have cool branding.
Yeah.
I love their brand, the branding itself, like the logo, the graphics. They, I think that they had at one point at least in 3 in-house graphic designers, and you can tell that with a lot of their marketing. So that, I mean, I would hope that the Convoy brand will live on to see another day. But I think that you hit the nail on the head. That you have to get these small carriers paid, medium-sized carriers paid. Even going, 60 days, 90 days is tough for small businesses. They need that cash and they need it quickly. So my only worry is that if some of this stuff, does have to go through arbitration or go through, bankruptcy rulings and all that, it's just
Yes.
going to make it tougher for these small carriers to get their money and get it quickly. Because the small carriers are always paid last, and they're the ones that should be paid first. And that's one thing that is unfortunate about this situation, and I hope gets solved quickly. But I guess kudos to the Flexport team for buying the technology on pennies on the dollar, apparently, for what they were reportedly worth.
That's the thing for me. So the big part I will say about this is they have already been using Convoy.
Mm.
So I'm interested. I would love to kind of know the numbers, because I'm wondering if when Convoy shut down, if that hurt them in the domestic side, and exactly what they ended up paying for it, because Flexport has been integrated into Convoy for some time to help with that domestic shipping. So what's cool is it's not going to take too much integration in regards to like processes and customers, or customers are likely already been using it. They might see more of the Convoy interface now, like the user interface. But it sounds like they've when I remember actually writing about this forever ago, but they've been integrated into the system and been using them for the domestic source. So that's it seems interesting to me. I'd love
It's almost
to
a data play.
just more of we can't cover it ourselves. We'll use you guys to do that type of
Okay.
thing. So I'm just interested in like, okay, maybe they were like a strong partner for Flexport, and for Flexport, it's like we gotta purchase this or else we're falling behind. So
very good point.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I think we'd find that out probably by like the number that it sells for. But that's something Rachel put in there that I actually kind of forgot about, even though I think I wrote about it forever. It was a while ago. But so that's the other part too, is like I wonder if it was almost a purchase that they kind of needed to make, which would be helpful in the price, I think, on Convoy's side. But we'll see if we can get a number out of them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with Flexport, the main criticism that I saw from it is like, oh, well, you laid all these people off, and then you have all this money now to go and buy out Convoy, and so that could be your point, making that they probably need this software in order to keep themselves in survival mode, and during a down market, which is everybody is experiencing right now. So maybe that's the justification behind it, because that was one of the bigger criticisms that I did see.
Yeah. So we'll figure it out. Let's see if we can find the price out on it, and we'll go from there. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and I just well, we'll see what happens. I was making a joke the other day, like the team that comes on, like I wonder how long they'll stick. It's there's a lot from the energy of cost cutting that Peterson seemed to be on about 3 weeks ago, and then you're gonna purchase this, and then clearly I know that they had some cash on hand, and there wasn't anything that crazy, but I don't know. Peterson has just seemed a little bit all over the place for me recently, and not in a bad way, but just in a strange way. So again, we'll see how it turns out.
I mean, maybe he's trying to find different ways to save money and also spend that money. And so obviously with the cost cutting and with different investments to keep their I guess their solution moving forward. There was also another cost-cutting initiative, and that was an article titled "The Great Train Robbery." This comes from Flexport's VP of Global Physical Security. But everything that basically cargo theft is at an all-time high, 10-year high as it is. And from talking to, I had an interview that posted earlier this week with Taryn, who works over in accounts payable accounts
Mhm.
payable with SPI Logistics. And she said that she's been trained from some of their internal teams that have been around for a while, that typically in economic downturns, you see rises in cargo theft. And so this happened in like 2008, 2009. And so it would really sort of, pair well, or not pair well, but that data tracks with what we're seeing right now with cargo theft being at a 10-year high. So I thought that this article from Flexport was really interesting, that talked about the different stages of train robberies and how they occur. Most of us heard, about a lot of the trains getting robbed out in Port of Long Beach, the Port of LA. You just sort of saw these sort of like dystopian train tracks with like boxes and
Yeah.
packaging materials just thrown everywhere. But it turns out like the spikes in the cargo theft, and this is, I'm reading from Flexport's article right now, says spikes in cargo theft, along with successful efforts to curb the trend, have hit the news cycle several times over the last couple of years. Known simply as shopping, the thieves board trains while they're passing through built up populated areas that have yet to pick up speed. So these trains that are moving from the port to different warehouses and facilities, they go very slow.
Mhm.
But so with Flexport, what they've done to try to solve this, it says by inputting data on recent thefts, rail schedules, police movements, etc., Flexport can now track connections between rail lines, criminal gangs, carriers, and more, which I think just leads to just sort of like the overall, like, what are you doing to combat this? Because from the research that I was, and shout out to Commercial Carrier Journal, who had a two-part series on their YouTube channel, is really, really good, talking about cargo theft. They posted it like a few weeks ago. It was really, really insightful. But they said that there's two kinds of stolen freight. There's strategic, which is like the bad guys sort of trick you into giving you the freight, and then there's also straight theft. So what's going on at the rail lines is just straight theft, because the freight is they're moving so slow that the freight is just sitting there. The thieves will see the trains coming through. They don't really have an idea of what kind of freight is on those different containers that are moving through, and so they're basically just like hopping on, cutting open the doors, and then just going inside and just opening up boxes. That's why you see that material just sort of thrown out everywhere. But there's also where the strategic freight, now it's becoming more of like a high impact, like high scale, like just thievery, where,
Yeah.
they're trying to, there was one situation that he talked about in particular, that if there is a high value load, like say, electronics that hits a load board, what will happen is that these networks of thieves will essentially flood your location with phone calls. They'll try to get as many people within their network, within their crime ring, to just flood your phones, so then that one of them has access to that load. And they will sometimes pay a cheaper rate in order to, or offer you the cheapest amount possible to move that freight. And a lot of brokers are going to say yes to that, because they're trying to, move for as much
Yep.
as possible, or trying to make their margins as much as possible. So they'll just go ahead and accept it. And so what they'll watch that freight move from place to place, and then they will strike when the iron is hot. That typically what happens is that drivers will, unless you are routing properly. So say, for example, if you're a driver and you're going to be hauling a load of flat screen TVs, what they're now doing to try to combat, just a truck just sitting overnight, is they want the driver to have their full hours available. They want them fully rested. They want them fully fueled up. So as soon as that freight hits their truck, they can drive as long as possible, because they're getting hit at truck stops. They're getting hit at rest stops. Thieves are just straight up just cutting open the back of the truck, but they're tracking it. So it's really like strategic thievery, that the driver is a lot of times unaware of what's going on. So shout out to Commercial Carrier Journal, because I learned a ton about, just how you can prevent it. They also talked a lot about the golden rule of stealing freight, is that you don't steal what you can't sell. And
Love that.
a couple, right? And the cool, or I guess I shouldn't say the cool thing. The interesting thing about this kind of freight is that food and beverage has been the top commodity that has been stolen for the last 10 years. Up until 2020, it was the top freight that was stolen, because once you steal it, it's consumed. And there's also
Yeah.
no serial number on, a
Mm.
bottle of liquor, or, seafood shipments, things like
Yeah.
high value, like steaks and seafood, things like that. Like, it's consumed, so it's gone. So once food and beverage is taken, it's just considered a loss. Whereas like a TV has a serial number on it, so you can
Mhm.
easily track that back to, a stolen shipment. So I thought that was really interesting. And food and bev is the number one commodity stolen, and that was the case from 2009 up until 2020. And then in 2020, while we're all at home, remember that golden rule. So the theft evolved into home goods, and then it evolved into electronics, because everyone is working from home. The kids are learning from home.
Yep.
But now in this year, it's back to food and bev as the number one commodity stolen. So he goes on to talk about different prevention tips. So focus on I loved this approach. Focus on your processes before you buy any tech or tools. There are these different locks that exist. I forget what they're called. Is like a specific kind of hard locks on the doors and landing locks on the truck itself to prevent the truck from even moving. So it says to
Mm.
focus on your processes first, have cameras at entry docks, entry points, and at the docks. Don't let anyone in the yard unless they're allowed to be there. Kind of going back to yard management solutions. But that, thieves will just drive into a yard and just take a look around and just see what kind of freight's being unloaded and just sort of watch things. So if you have those different checkpoints of when thieves arrive, and or not thieves arrive, but all of your trucks, like no one should be allowed into your yard unless they're supposed to be there. Simple things like
Yes.
focusing on that part of the process before you invest in technology and like different locking, security cameras, things like that. Checking paperwork when drivers leave to make sure it all matches up, because that's another scam that's been going on, is that, they'll get the paperwork and then the driver is unassuming when they get different kinds of paperwork. So they don't have any
Yeah.
idea. Cross-docking is also another high point of where, cargo theft can happen as well. And what I love about this is they also, preach the power of education, empower your drivers to be that next line of defense and make them aware, because drivers, they don't want to, they know when they're hauling dangerous freight, but they also don't
Yeah.
want to lose that dangerous or
No.
that high value freight as well. So empowering them to be rested up, fueled up, so when they do leave, they can drive as long as they can. Securing rear doors while the driver is sleeping. Staying overnight only at secure lots, because truck stops are also highly targeted. And then there really is an association for everything. But TAPA, which is another association I've never heard of until after this, video series. Um,
Tapas.
TAPAs,
Yeah.
and it stands for Transported Asset Protection Association. Apparently, they have a record amount of people that are going to be attending their conference coming up in December in Boca Raton. So I thought that I never knew that there was, but it makes a lot of sense that there is. And then they said also education. So CargoNet is a cargo theft prevention company.
Yes.
So they said to use them as well, but make sure you get your processes in order. And then conferences like TAPA, companies like CargoNet, also Overhaul, all of these companies help with prevention, tips, monitoring, things like that. So I thought that was just a really fun, like sort of deep dive into, I guess, the criminal world of moving freight, which unfortunately happens more, as the economy is not seeing, such, good times. So thank you for listening to my cargo crime rant and speech.
Well, it's I actually said this at TIA too. It's like, don't put me in front of an audience. Uh, I kind of called out because that's a room full of brokers, and so I'm like, this is a perfect opportunity for me to be kind of honest. And when it comes to cargo theft, yes, there's like there's clearly highway. There's a lot of like carrier share programs, carrier 411 that you can use to kind of like guide you into the direction of like whether or not this carrier is risk for cargo theft, etc. CargoNet's a great one too, right? Using and reporting to that over time. My biggest fear, especially when we see that number get so big, yes, I do agree. It's like a lot of it has to do with the recession. Are people that are struggling right now and are, of course, stealing more. But what percent of those are? I'd love to know what that number looks like if we take out uh, what was almost self-induced by our own industry. So what I mean
Hmm.
by that is how much of that is from your carrier rep knowing that they're incentivized off big rips, saying to themselves, you know what, this guy's known for putting it on a train. Fuck it. I want this $500 rip. I'm going to put him on it. Because I see that stuff happen in these brokers all the time.
Hmm.
And there are compliance steps. And I think there's a lot of digital players that have steps to avoid even a rep making that decision. Like they can't even be on this. But like, how often are we overriding that function? How often are our reps using highway, seeing that they're at risk and still giving the load to those carriers, right? And that's like my biggest fear is in an environment we've talked about, is especially at Freightwaves, where brokers are having a rough time. I can guarantee your sales reps haven't seen the commission checks that they saw 2 years ago. And because you only incentivize them off of their rips, which is dumb to begin with, and people aren't doing that anymore. So consider not doing it either. They're actually like doing this on purpose and knowing that at the end of the day, like you're it's going to be an insurance claim possibly. There's different steps that's going to avoid them truly being in trouble for it. I mean, I've seen I've I've seen C-level executives like just let even some shipments gladly go without insurance coverage. So it's like what worse how worse could it get? So that's my biggest critique is like I hope that our industry is not just like hearing this news and being like, yeah, cargo theft is like at its worst. Like, what steps do you have in compliance that's making sure this isn't happening?
Hmm.
And when Joe Schmo comes up to you and it's a rough day in your brokerage and you're not hitting your goal, and Joe Schmo says, hey, listen, this carrier's kind of shady, but he's going to do it for a really good price. Can I just put him on it? How often are you saying no to that? And
Hmm.
how are you saying no to that? Are you saying, work on it, see what else you can put on it? Or are you saying, no, that's not how we operate? And
Hmm.
so that's like a big thing I just like to challenge our industry is like, are you being very serious in how you're implementing ways to stop cargo fraud? And also, I think that this is not going to go away. I
Hmm.
think this is going to become just a bigger issue over time. We're not seeing the economy flip anytime soon. And so for me, it's like there's going to be a point where a shipper is going to ask you, what steps are you taking? And if you aren't taking those steps, I mean, the insurance isn't going to pay for it. It's going to come from your company. We just saw, we lost a broker the other day, right? Clarissa just wrote about it for what they really got hit with. I think it was a $700,000 claim that put them already back in the rear, and then they couldn't get out of that situation, so they ended up having to file bankruptcy. And you know, I, I appreciate the way that the owner kind of talked through that situation, but I also wanted to know more detail about how that happened. Because to say like, oh, we're costs are too high in this industry, no one can play and be a part of this. I'd love to know how that insurance claim
Hmm.
got put together, right? Like, how did that end up falling apart? Because that is a big claim. Someone did something wrong, and the fact that you ate it tells me you did something wrong.
Hmm.
Because I don't know any broker who I would, but if a shipper made me eat a $700,000 claim to keep them as a customer in this industry, I'm a buy now. You can go anywhere else. Like, again, bad customers, but I can guarantee if you ate that $700,000 claim, you did something wrong. So,
Hmm.
uh, that's just kind of where I am when it comes to what are we really doing. And I think that will become a value at some point in time in the next
Very true.
so many months. Maybe it takes a couple of years, but shippers will want to know that. It'll no longer be, hey, I've got a cheap truck in the area. It's like, great, is your cheap truck gonna steal my shit? Like, um, and then what are you doing to avoid that? Because I've been dealing with this left and right. And the more that you get into expensive freight, especially, and you touched on this, and I love this, expensive freight that can be easily offloaded. Like when I used to move steel, I'd have drivers all the time be like, if you don't pay us an extra $50 for detention, we're going to take this off our truck. I'm like, yeah, okay, where are you going to go find an overhead crane in New Jersey? And pay for that to take this off your and then where are you sitting it? Like how are you moving? You know what I mean? Like there's some freight that's like, yeah, buddy, it's going to cost you more than the freight itself to steal this load. But when you're dealing with produce and small packages, boxes, a lot of the freight in this industry, we talked about like almonds, right? Like or pistachios.
Mm.
Like those things are expensive. A truckload of pistachios, I'll gladly steal that truck if I can. Like that's like depending on what country you're from, like generational wealth right there. So it's just be smart about it, and I hope that that's like part of the training in providers out there is like not this like come to us in situations. No, these are our standards. We stick
Mhm.
to them. Everyone else can say goodbye.
And I would imagine that a lot of shippers would value that approach and use it
Exactly.
as we would talk about how do you market yourself? How do you differentiate yourself? This is one of those ways. You can use these reports of skyrocketing cargo theft and say, this is how we're going to prevent that. And guess what? During bid season, I would imagine that a lot of companies, a lot of shippers are going to be looking at those different kinds of criteria versus just somebody who is just going to be bottom of the barrel cheap. And so having some of these initiatives set up in advance, I think will definitely help, for a lot of brokers out there trying to find an edge. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation like this situation that's happening currently
I love
over
that.
at TQL.
Ha!
Um,
I love this.
Dooner had this great tweet that was, and if you're just listening, you're not watching. A driver pulled up. He spray painted the side of his truck. Says TQL, pay me my $8,000, and then on the side it says I don't run for charity. So he parks this truck right outside of TQL headquarters. And basically trying to get the rest of his money. And instead of being ignored, he took a very creative approach to park his truck in front of it and ended up getting his money, or not all of his money, but he got $5,700 is basically what Matt Dahl had a live stream with this guy earlier, and he said that they caved and paid him, the driver, $5,700. So shouting in different ways kind of works.
Yeah, and I think I might have sent you the other one too. It sounds like this is like a play this dude does. Like apparently like he will gladly spray paint anyone on the side of his truck that owes him money and go like this is I don't know if this is the first time he's done it or if he's going to keep doing it as he goes forward. But it sounds like yeah, when I spray anything on my trailers, I don't take it down until I get paid and all my trucks will only run local. That's the best part, only run local. So it's like this dude's like, we're only taking Cincinnati loads until you pay us up. We just drive around this. Honestly, Gabriel, if that's you, I don't hate it. It's so
I don't
petty.
hate it either.
It's
Get your
so
money.
petty. It's so good. It's so good because you know that he pulled up and everyone started saying like, "Oh my god, is that my
Oh
driver?"
shit. Like
Yeah, like everyone's like, "Oh my god, who is this dude? What's it?" And he ended up getting. He didn't get the full amount, but he did get what he I guess deserved. And uh, will we see more of this? I've never experienced this, to be honest with you. I've never had a driver show up and for a check. I will say I have visited a customer once to ask where a check was going, which lawyer said was not illegal, and but just to like spray paint your truck so awesome. Like imagine just sitting outside the stadium, like TQL stadium like that, like so and then you drive honestly, I understand the local part, but like even if you were to drive like nationally, like if I'm a driver and I see that in someone's truck, I'm probably thinking twice when I take a TQL load.
very
Like
true. That the side the truck space, the lack of advertising on truck space is really interesting. I was tasked with this when
Yes.
I worked as an executive assistant, where they wanted me to find ways to monetize the sides of the trucks, because it was just pretty much just free billboards driving down the highway. I mentioned that to Matthew Leffler recently, and he's like, I would kind of argue against that, because advertising can have a different approach where, if that truck gets into an accident, or a car around you it gets into an accident, then they can blame your truck for distracting them. So I
Wow.
mean, at least like this method of spray painting the side of your truck, like it works. And especially if you're staying put, it works in a variety of ways to get paid.
Lawyers ruin everything. Except for Edgar Allan Poe poems. That's I think that's what we've learned. Matthew Leffler. Like, I'm just trying to put a cool ad on my truck, and now you're telling me everyone's gonna be like, that guy's a murderer? Like, that is some lawyer advice. Ruining everything.
All right. Well,
Oh.
let's switch gears a little bit to the last segment of today's show. We've already been going an hour and a half. Yeah, these shows, I guess we just got to book it for 2 hours each time. I don't know how we cut it down, because there's so much cool stuff to talk about. So the
So
next
much.
one is, or the final segment is, source to porch, the logistics of. We each get to choose our favorite story of the month, and you have one. So I'll go ahead and let you kick this one off and present it for us.
Yeah, so this is a story about Canada's largest supply chain loss of all time, and it's tied in with our favorite Target. So about 7 years ago, Target was announcing its first stores in Canada. However, behind the scenes, it was an absolute disaster. Goods were just coming into distribution centers faster than they expected. Of course, a ton of issues with barcodes, computer systems not matching up, shipments just piling up, and at some point, Target actually had to fly some of their supply chain people in the United States up to Canada in order to try to figure out some of these long-term solutions, which didn't last long because they aren't in Canada today. Now, from what we've heard, it sounds like their contractor at the time was not the best, and wasn't best way to explain this, well versed in the logistics of Canada in particular. Now, so to launch in Canada, it was called Project Bacon, which is like so interesting to me. I don't know how Target. I guess like yeah, like the ham of Canadian bacon, or maybe that's it. And so it was supposed to be, of course, they decided they wanted to open up stores coast to coast. And more often than none, when companies do this in Canada, when US companies and retailers move to Canada, they open one store at a time and slowly progress. But Target was like, no, we're Target. We're going to just kick butt here, and we're going to open up all across. Now, their distribution in the United States at the time was just best well-oiled machine of all time, no issues at all. But in Canada, they're using a company called 11 Points Logistics to manage three large warehouses at the time. So they're located near Quebec border, outside of Toronto, and also near Calgary. So again, across all of Canada, about 1.5 million square feet. And as they arrived, there was just a ton of discrepancies with what was in the boxes. Mm-hmm. Computer records were really delayed. And for example, a lot of like their boxes, they would say 24 shirts were in there, but there'd only be 10. And so just a lot of supply chain problems went with it. It looks like one of the biggest issues they had in their warehouses at the time, it was like the biggest like Christmas item for them was these Barbie SUVs. So the toddler SUVs that you can stick like two kids in. Well, they had ordered just way too many, apparently. Like the order sheet was wrong. So they had just like literally so much space in their warehouse was just covered in Barbie SUVs that weren't selling at the level that they had accidentally ordered. And at the end of it all, this ended up costing Target about $941 million before interest and taxes at the time. And other retailers like Home Depot and Walmart apparently have tried to do this too, open in Canada, and just don't realize or understand the local markets or just supply chain within Canada as well, which is kind of interesting because I remember talking to like Uber Freight at one point, like, when are you guys going to open up in Canada? They're like, it's a lot more difficult than you think it is, routing and of course pricing, etc. So we're like slowly going to move into that. And I think this kind of showcased it. I mean, especially someone as big as Target, who I think even today has really interesting supply chain and how they use their stores now for warehousing and how
Oh, true.
they deliver from home. To see that, yeah, it's the largest supply chain loss of all time in Canada, 941. I have read other reports too that said it was closer to like 1.6 billion dollars. So yeah, just trying to expand your supply chain. Don't do it all at once. Don't order on accident one of like the largest things that can't be broken down into pieces, including Barbie SUVs. And yeah, they haven't been back since, it sounds like. So yeah, be careful of Canada. It's harder than you think that would be like a Mexico problem, just like trying to expand into Mexico. But I guess it's Canada's always been an issue for U.S. retailers.
And if you think about it, how many of those how long during the year can little kids use those SUVs? It's not exactly. There's a lot of snow on the ground. I
Maybe
don't
like
know
where
how
you're from
powerful
all the
they are.
time.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
In
and to give
Florida, unless
you
it's flooding.
a little bit update too, because when I was doing this, I was like, well, what other big like supply chain losses have there been? One of the other ones I found pretty interesting was, where is it? Apple. They actually lost $1 billion from unfulfilled orders back with their launching their PowerBook laptops. Because they didn't, there was some other HP that was coming out at the same time, and their provider just couldn't keep up with like the chips and everything. So this stuff happens quite frequently, and I just think it's interesting how these like it's always like weird situations that lead to these huge problems.
The ripple effect. They call it the supply chain for a reason.
Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, some fun losses. I'm covering. I'm going to be covering some of them throughout the rest of the holiday season, because I think they're interesting on the radio. So you can check that out too.
Yes, I definitely co-sign that, because I had no idea that that would even be a problem. I would just assume that you could just sell those things off eventually. But you're right. If the more real estate you're taking up inside of a warehouse, then that means less turnover. There's less things that could be coming in and making more money. It's just taking up a lot of space, and
Exactly.
unfortunate. So I guess, this is that's a really good one, especially from the fact of just thinking of it from the overall supply chain and just trying to get a grasp on what some of these big retailers are doing. And I think a lot of other companies could learn from that as well. Okay.
Yours is interesting, so I'm excited to hear this one.
I needed to take a sip before I started on this journey, because mine this time is the logistics of tinned fish and canned tuna. So I have eaten. Do you eat canned tuna at all, or tinned fish?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, that's true. That's strange.
I
Well,
just
I
didn't.
mean, I have a cat, so it's like tuna. There's nothing like seeing a cat when you open up a can of tuna. Yeah, tuna. Like, you never had a tuna fish sandwich?
I have it
Like,
all the time. I did it. I thought I was maybe like the strange one who did that all
oh,
the time. I have at least 3 or 4. It's almost like orange juice in my house. Like if I run low on tuna, I'm going out that day and like getting an entire new order. So I keep that thing strapped on me.
or
As far
chicken
as like,
too, because I make a mean buffalo chicken dip,
oh,
and the canned chicken is like perfect for those recipes.
smart. Yeah, really smart. So I grew up eating canned tuna my whole life. So I thought I was one of the weird ones that still like keeps it in their house, and I eat it at least 2 or 3 times a month. It's just a really quick, like good protein, affordable thing that you can keep in in the cabinet. You don't have to worry about it spoiling. So I'm a big fan of CNCS or CNBC videos on YouTube. They make these great breakdowns that are sometimes, as short as 5 minutes, sometimes as long as 30 minutes to an hour. But they really cover with a lot of the things that they talk about, the logistics side of it. So I wanted to share this quick little video about that popped up on my timeline this week about canned tuna. and how I guess millennials have kind of fallen out of love with it. So let me play this quick clip.
What?
Hopefully we can hear some audio from it.
Within the walls. Canned tuna has been a staple in American pantries for years, and for good reason. It's cheap and loaded with protein. The process of how it gets into American homes looks something like this. Thai Union and other similar entities primarily gather tuna from global fishing fleets in tuna-rich zones. Fishing vessels spend days or even weeks catching fish before returning to port. Some even prolong their time at sea using transshipment, a process where they offload their catch to a carrier ship, resupply, and head back out for more. Once caught, the tuna is prepped for processing. Nets in Thailand, where the tuna is frozen, and from there, it's transported to places like Lyons, Georgia. The tuna shipped from Thailand is then thawed at Chicken of the Sea's canning facility to about 38 degrees. It's then unwrapped from its plastic casing, cut to size for cans filled with brine, oil, or water, then pressure cooked in its retort process, where about 18,000 cans are cooked at a time. Once the tuna is done cooking, it's then ready for shipping. But there are other ways to prepare.
Yeah, so that's a quick clip from.
As soon as that started playing, she smelled it through the. You smell the tuna through the computer?
Grace is holding her cat up to watch the video about tuna in case you're listening to the podcast version of this. But they talk about the logistics of it, the transportation behind it, and so I thought that was super interesting. But what's more interesting is that obviously catching tuna, catching any kind of fish is susceptible to a lot of the rising costs, inflation that we see. There's rising vessel costs, fuel costs. And then there's also the trouble, specifically when it comes to tuna, of migratory patterns. So the tuna migratory patterns are changing. And so if you think about rising costs in vessels, rising costs in fuel, and then trying to find the damn fish, there's a lot of money being wasted on a product that is traditionally thought of as very affordable. So Thai Union, which was the company that they were just featuring, is one of the largest seafood buyers in the world. So they're the owners of Chicken of the Sea, also Red Lobster Group. So they operate on a 3% margin, which is crazy to think about. That that just speaks to the amount of costs that are involved, which I know your cat sounds like she's very upset by this as well.
She's just very upset.
But then there's another article, because with a lot of these stories, it leads me into these rabbit holes, because what originally, sort of back it up just a little bit, my TikTok For You page has just been flooded with tinned fish talk. And in addition to canned tuna, tinned fish is also making a gigantic comeback, because it basically, you can keep it for a lot of the same reasons as canned tuna. You can keep it in, it's shelf stable. You can keep it in your cabinets for a while, and it's affordable, and also very like the sustainable approach. I'll get into more of that in just a second. But recently, Forbes had an article that said, since the start of the pandemic, tinned seafood sales have been on the rise, especially with the abundance of TikTok recipes and tinned seafood boards. The segment has and continues to grow, with the global canned seafood market expected to reach $50 billion in sales by 2030. Expanding at a compound annual growth rate of close to 6%, so 5.9%. Then there's also some sustainability questions, specifically around tuna in particular, and just seafood as a whole, which has led to this trend of tinned fish. And this little bit, courtesy of Morning Brew. So I'm going to share this little, because I love their graphics that they shared for this article.
Love this.
And they talk about sales of canned seafood shot up by 10% in the US in 2022. The primary driver has been TikTok. And because TikTok creators are creating it very in an aesthetic way. But I love this line that says, while some users claim the trend is giving Great Depression,
that's literally what I was going to say. It's because we're so poor that we can't even...
But I love that aspect of it.
Giving Great Depression. It's giving poor. Your tuna fish obsession is giving poor.
And then they go on to say the hashtag of tinned fish dinners now has 26 million views. that that hashtag, this article was written back in January. So I went and looked last night to see how much it's grown. That hashtag now has 110 million views of tinned fish. You're probably wondering,
TikTok?
how do you make like, how do you make like this kind of stuff? I guess aesthetic. Like, how do you make tinned fish aesthetic? Well, I got a good recap for you. Is this one creator who went to Spain recently, and he spent it was a challenge that he goes to every country, and he tries to find I guess just different things to try in that country for 30 days straight. Spain is one of the top places where it comes from, where a lot of tinned fish comes from. So I'm going to switch to this TikTok really quick.
I love like the expression of tinned fish.
It's just, it sounds gross, but
it sounds poor. Like the word tin. Like
all right, so let me play this quick video of all the different ways that you can use tinned fish.
Because I love all of them, and I just didn't think it was fair. Tough list. Starting at number 5, we got the baby eels with fries and fried eggs. Oh my God. Coming up at number 4 is the sardines with the olive and tomato salad. Oh, I'm still dreaming about that shit. Number 3, we got the classic Spanish snack, the pinchos, which is octopus and olive skewers. Ooh. I could not do a list without the bar Quimet. I mean, I know I didn't do the actual tinned fish myself, but this was an experience of a lifetime. You have to go. Number 1 spot, uni on toast. The most simplest we've ever done. But man, uni in a tin. I'm still thinking about what the 30-day challenge.
So so that is the growth of sort of the tinned fish market, because going back to the sustainability issue, there's a couple different websites that I found. That one is called like the tinned fish market. They have a la carte options that you can order these different tinned fish from, or tinned seafood, I guess that is what I should call it. They also have subscription boxes, and they said from Tinned Fish Market, they said the canneries we work with subscribe to sustainable fishing practices such as pole and line fishing, which reduces bycatch and does not damage the seabed. So they specifically go after fishermen who are using a line and a pole, and not like these giant just conglomerates of these fishing vessels, like Red Lobster Group and things like that. There's another company too called Wild Planet, and they use the same methods. It's very focused on sustainable fishing, and just trying to make sure that you are eating, if you love seafood, if you want to find little ways to become more sustainable, things like that. This was another great example of just trying to be more responsible with your consumption. I mean, obviously, I preach that companies as a whole are responsible for, sustainability options, because overwhelming majority of carbon emissions are by like 90% of carbon emissions are by like the top 10% of all companies. But if you want to come up with better ways to make your, I guess, just little sustainability tricks at a time. So I thought that was a really just like fun deep dive. So shout out to Wild Planet, shout out to the Tinned Fish Market. I have since ordered a bunch of seafood from them, so I'm excited to give it a try. I'm a star-kissed girly at heart, and so I'm excited to give other areas of different seafood a try, especially like the octopus. I've even seen with a lot of the tinned fish that they will just put it right in pasta and cook the pasta in the same oil that the tinned fish was in. So it makes for like super quick dinners, and you just spruce it up a little bit with your own stuff, of course.
Nice little tuna helper.
Yeah.
Which is good. Like sometimes tuna helper hits if you make it right.
Tuna salad, like pasta, like love it. And so, being a Floridian, I love my seafood. I'm a little bit of a seafood snob. As I say this after talking about tinned fish.
I kind of like my seafood. I'm a snob about it. I get it in a can.
I would say that about fresh seafood. I definitely like when I go to landlocked states, I can tell. When stuff is like just not as fresh, which I'm spoiled, I know, to live here, right next to the best shrimp in the world. I will say that Jacksonville Mayport Fisheries has the best shrimp in the world, and I'll fight anybody on that topic. But I am looking for more ways to be sustainable with my seafood consumption. And this just, the TikTok aesthetic just made it look a little dreamy. I'm not going to lie.
Sustainability is giving poor, Blythe. Like,
I have been influenced by giving Great Depression.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be sustainable over here. That means... So we're going to stick to the canned stuff. No, that's really cool. Especially, yeah, I feel like I need to maybe expand my tinned fish thoughts, because yeah, I'm just tuna pretty much over here, like chicken sometimes for the dip, but interesting.
So I'll let you know how my order goes. It is a little bit more expensive, where like a Wild Planet, for example, is like $6 or $7 a tin. Which I'm used to paying that for like a 4-pack of Star
Actually, yeah, let me know how good it tastes, because that's but there better be a taste difference, because if there's not, I'm sustainably upset.
Well, I think that's a really fun place to end this edition of Freight Friends. We talked to, there's a lot of drama and crazy stuff going on in the world just in general. Obviously in freight, we talked a lot about with it, cargo crimes, but there are some bright spots. There are some cool things happening in the world, with sustainability options, trying to avoid cargo crimes, and trying to find a place for all the Barbie SUVs out there. And then, of course, we have Freightwaves F3 coming up next week. So there's a lot of good stuff going on within the industry. There are bright spots out there. So hopefully we'll have another show for you after F3. And, we'll be able to shine a light on more of those important initiatives, including things like Logistics Girlie.
Amen, sister. Amen.
And I'll link to all of that in the show notes, including your link tree. But Grace, again, thank you for coming on the show. Another 2-hour jam-packed episode that we will schedule this out live to all of the different video platforms and podcast, of course, too, to get you ready for F3. But until then, we'll see you real soon. Go Jags. I guess go Vikings.
Go Vikings, I guess. Let's see who our new quarterback is. I'm a Jags fan now, baby.
Yes.
No, I'm not. I'm a Lions fan. Let's go Lions. We're going back. I'm finally on a bandwagon that team.
All good things. I'm sure the Lions will take all the bandwagon fans that they that will take it, as well as Jaguars too. It is a very cat heavy episode today.
Yeah.
So shout out to the cat teams and shout out to Grace's kitty too.
I love it.
All right, we'll see y'all real soon.